And it should catch up here in just a second. All right, so we're moving forward today, Ken.
Yeah. On the quarter past the hour.
Well, the old saying, better late than never.
Mm-hmm.
All
It's
right,
true.
so I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna update all this. I'm gonna update all this stuff where you keep the masses entertained. How about that?
Sounds good. The question is, what in the world happened last night in Baltimore?
Oh man, bro, what?
What was that?
There's some weird stuff there. The power went
It's
out on the what's the term for the ship? Whatever the ship
cargo
was. Cargo ship, yeah.
Yeah.
The power goes out, then it comes back on. Man, I haven't heard an update. I'm assuming.
It's the weirdest deal, man.
But
And it's so weird because you see that video and it's dark and you watch that video happen and you can see it hit the pillar of that bridge. And man, it's like, but it looks like it's going super slow.
Mhm.
It looks like a bumper car. It should just turn and bounce off of it, whatever.
It
But
looks
no.
like the there's like that meme video, when something's going wrong, like the old railroad going across the tracks across the canyon
Yeah.
and it collapses.
Yeah.
Like it just totally and completely it crumbles.
It's the weirdest
Man.
thing.
In Baltimore, that's a major port area. What in the world?
I know. And the thing about it is so you see all those boats. So here was the question: where was the boat going? Did it come from underneath? No, there's no way. There's no way. It's way too tall because it's the weirdest deal. It comes. Is it trying to go out the other direction, and the river current turns it back, or
I don't know, man.
I couldn't tell from the video. I don't know that area enough to know if it's because a lot of times in Houston's, for example,
Mhm.
on 610, the 610 loop around Houston on the southeast side of town, they have what's called the Ship Channel Bridge.
Okay.
And the Ship Channel Bridge, bro, is literally, it's I don't know, a half a mile high,
Right.
a quarter mile high, whatever.
Right.
It's there's a massive amount of room below it for those huge, large cargo ships to come up the ship channel and come and dock in there. It doesn't look like that's that kind of bridge.
Right.
So it's in a river area. That was a river.
Correct.
So it was so weird. I don't know where the harbor is from there and so on and so forth. So it was really, man, that was disastrous.
I don't know. Maybe somebody out there can give us an update.
How many cars did they say they think fell in?
I didn't see a number, but all I saw was mass casualty is what I had read.
Wow. Goodness. Whew, that's terrible.
Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Yeah. I wonder if people are going to be able to put up with the sound of my voice today.
It's amazing, bro.
I know. It's like
Crazy.
I was doing a special nose cleaning deal and I got the cotton ball stuck all the way up in my
So we had we were FaceTiming on was that Sunday evening? Yeah, Sunday evening. We did a little Zoom deal, and you were not feeling good. You were starting to feel it then, right?
Yeah, very true.
And I got off the phone. Of course, we'd been crying. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute and whatever. And bro, I got off the phone and through Zoom,
yeah,
I got what you had.
I know. We got it. It transported. This is some weird deal.
I don't know how that
This new
happened.
COVID variant. I'm
It's transferable electronically. It wouldn't surprise me.
oh, here comes the dingbats on YouTube.
Are they coming?
Yeah. Ridwan Ismail. Bible is not word of God. How can God died? If Jesus was God, God didn't have beginning and end. Jesus never
Oh,
said,
man.
worship me rather than worship only God alone. There's no God but Allah.
Ridwan does not know what
Hey,
he just opened.
hey, Ridwan, come say it to my face, Bubba.
You're
Because
you're
here's
right. You're
the
right.
deal. We'd have the ability to rid one.
Here's what I would say to Ridwan. Here's what I'd say to Ridwan. Of course, if this was a discipleship conversation, this is not. This is YouTube and this is
Yeah,
some bot
exactly.
or whatever. But to Ridwan, what I would say is this: our God is the only God who robed himself in flesh and
Yeah,
came and paid the price and was victorious over death. He didn't die. He gave himself and rose from the grave victorious. And
yeah,
he was the express image of the invisible God. There is only one God. There is not more than one. So,
yeah. And it's strange because what's funny is that sometimes I wonder if people like this even know that the Quran says to listen to Jesus and that Jesus was a true prophet. And so if Jesus is a true prophet, you can't say he's not a true prophet.
right.
And it says, and it's funny because it says Jesus, the Quran says Jesus didn't really die, he just appeared to die. But the problem is you got a writing from somebody who comes centuries after, who wasn't even an eyewitness, that's just making it up. And yet at the same time, you know, you have eyewitnesses that were there that were not only, so you have eyewitnesses that believed in him, eyewitnesses who didn't believe in him, and eyewitnesses that were had no skin in the game, which were the Romans. So you had people who believed in Jesus, people who didn't believe in Jesus, who or didn't want to, which were the Pharisees and the religious Jews. And then you had the Romans, who were the ones who, so it's a perfect setup. They're the ones who actually executed the crucifixion. So, you know, in this entire process, you can't say, well, he didn't really die. Well, then you have a conspiracy that involves the power of the world, the Romans, the religious power that didn't want Jesus to be the Messiah, and the people who had seen miracles and who believed that Jesus was the Lord.
Yeah.
It is an astronomical leap to not to believe that those conspiracies were uh we're all coordinated. No way. You could not get the disciples, the Jews, and the Romans to coordinate a conspiracy, and yet you're going to believe something that was said by someone who came, you know,
Yeah. Well,
centuries after.
Ridwan, we appreciate you listening. And we just ask that you listen with an open mind and an open heart today, because here's what I believe. If you'll do that, Jesus will reveal himself. There are countless stories of Jesus on the other side of the river, beckoning those with a hungry heart for God
That's it.
and revealing himself. So we believe that, man, the power of the Mobilized Church podcast. I'm not sure where Ridwan is today, but I believe that the Holy Ghost can bring spiritual revelation.
If you're a seeker of truth, he'll reveal himself. He said that. He'll show up. He'll reveal himself in a dream. He reveal himself in person.
That's it. That's it. Well, we're off to a rousing start today.
That's good. Well, at least Ridwan's not a bot.
Right.
I mean,
We do
we'll
appreciate the
engage that.
engagement.
We've
Yeah.
we've gotten some crazy comments from some AI robots and stuff like that. So his response at least proves that it's a real person.
It's
So
a real person,
we'll engage you as a human, Ridwan.
not as a bot for sure.
Yeah,
All right, you ready to go, bro? We're running a little bit behind
let's go.
all the things. So let's just go at it today. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Chris Dillingham alongside my big brother Ken Dillingham Jr. the third on this Tuesday morning. Ken, beautiful day today. You're playing hurt today. You're playing hurt, but you're fighting through it.
I am. I'm stuffy. I'm a little stuffy.
You were stuffy. We're gonna be able to. I don't know. Maybe Reese can do some magic on the post recording production.
Clear up my nasalness.
Absolutely. Well,
Maybe you can.
for real. Well, we are glad to be back. We were out last week. I was out in beautiful Phoenix and then Sedona, Grand Canyon. Man, Ken, Sedona's beautiful, man.
Isn't that
It's
something?
a weird place. It's a weird place. A lot of spiritual stuff out there, but is absolutely gorgeous. Got a little time of hiking and all that good stuff. So we took a little time off and get recuperated. I will say this, and I'll just say it publicly. I just need to get this off my chest. So I'm not a pickleball guy, but my wife and I played pickleball with my in-laws, and we got absolutely and utterly humiliated. So I hate to admit that publicly, but I'm gonna do that. I do want to just say real quick, we engaged a gentleman on YouTube, Ridwan, and
Ridwan Ismail.
Appreciate the comments.
Yeah.
And he's a real person talking
so,
about Christianity versus Islam and some of those kinds of things. And so
we thought he was a bot at first. We thought he was an AI bot, but he's not, and he's responding. And
appreciate the engagement today. So, Ken, we're here today, a little heavy-hearted.
That's true.
Been a tough couple of days, and we want to say thank you to everybody that has reached out to us. Our mom passed away, had battled health issues for quite a while, but seemed like she was on the upward trend, Ken.
Yeah.
And then Sunday morning, get that call that you never want to get.
It's true.
But we do appreciate all of the texts and comments and all that from everybody during this challenging time. So,
amen.
We're here today.
Mom was she was integral in our, coming to truth. And so we're thankful for that, and thankful that we have the hope, to see her again.
That's exactly right. So I think today's conversation kind of flows from that. It's obviously been on that. What you just said right there has been really on my mind the last couple of days. And so, we want to kind of talk about that. The power of the choice, man. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We look at what God did through our stepdad, delivering him from alcoholism and the transformation that happened in his life. But I remember those early days, man. We were so skeptical of the apostolic message and all of that stuff. But Mom allowed Jesus to just change her.
That's so true.
Bro, look at the impact that's had.
That's so true, dude. It's, I tell you what, at the end of the day, it really is an unlikely, I guess that's a good word, right?
Yeah.
I think it is an unlikely, an unlikely thing for us to be here,
Absolutely. 100%. So, all right, with that said, we want to have a conversation today, and I'm going to kind of maybe let you just take this ball and run with it. But we want to talk about, I started to say the difference between passive and active discipleship, but that not really.
There you go.
We don't really want to say the difference between that. We want to talk about how to activate discipleship in our life, and so I think there is a view of a lot of people that there's maybe not expressed, but there's kind of a mindset a little bit about what passive discipleship looks like and what active discipleship looks like. So I think in a lot of people's minds, there might be a little bit of a difference there. And so why don't you set it up for us
Alright.
and talk about how we activate discipleship consistently in our lives?
Sure. Well, I think that, one, um, leg of the stool, to set this up. I think one leg of the stool probably has to be this element of, that and I don't know that you hear it as much, these days. The tides have turned. There's a different it's kind of a different world that we live in.
Mhm.
But you did hear, particularly in the 90s, the decade of the 90s and the 2000, early 2000 to 2010, there was a real, um, sort of a push, a dialogue that was promoted that said that, you know, the probably encapsulated by the phrase, um, you know, uh, do do everything that you can to tell people about Jesus and use words
Mhm.
only if you have to, or
Yeah, if
some
necessary, right?
yeah, some variation of sort of that thing, like that that the way that you show the world who you are and what you are is not by what you say, but it's how you live.
Mhm.
And which, by the way, is actually an attributed comment that isn't even it's not even true. It's sort of
Yeah,
like a mythological. It's not that wasn't even said. It was, but I think that but it was. That's not the point. The point is that there was that sentiment. There was that
right.
kind of thinking, and the thinking was that you just live out Jesus, and don't you don't have to tell people that you're Jesus, or Jesus follower. Just live it out and people will know that you're a Jesus follower.
Yeah.
And and the thing about it is while, you know, the only way, okay, here we go. This is a good way to say it. The only way that kind of argument makes any kind of sense or has any kind of relevance is in a world where you polarize active versus passive discipleship, or active versus passive declaration of who you are in Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that it's impossible to make disciples without engaging people in conversation. And so
Yes.
what we want to do today is to actually remove the middle wall of partition. We'll use a biblical phrase. We want to remove the middle wall of partition between this idea that you can have passive influence, passive discipleship, passive um, uh, uh, declaration of who Jesus is, that stands opposed to an active declaration of him, an active life that you're clearly communicating. So today we want to sort of walk all the way around that concept and take a look at it and say, what would happen if we realized that it requires what we do, what we say. It requires conversations with people, while at the same time it requires us being it. If that's who you are, it will come out in what you do, and it will come out in what you say. That's the essence of true disciples.
It's interesting. You referenced that phrase at the very beginning, preach the gospel, use words if necessary,
Yeah.
right? That's the quote. And it's interesting how these things get so deeply entrenched in
Right.
our belief system and whatever.
Right.
That quote is attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi.
Right.
And and but that's not what he said. Like,
Yep.
he definitely didn't say that. What he was saying was in essence, don't basically what he was saying was don't preach something that your life is not demonstrating. That's what the message was. the message was, "Don't go out and preach something that you're not really living."
Right.
And so it doesn't have it so but it's just amazing how that's taken on a life of its own, and now all of a sudden, that's become a deeply entrenched belief system in so many people that, man, what's most important is, like, man, we don't wanna shove it down their throats, and so you
Ah,
just go out there and you just live it, let them see it, and you don't have to say the words, and you don't have to speak it, just let them
you
see.
don't have to tell anybody. That I
Yeah,
mean, you used to hear that.
yeah,
If you're really a Christ follower, you don't have to tell anybody. They'll know. Okay, so all right, so let's tackle that. Let's tackle that right now. Why does this one phrase? Because I like you just said, they're circular,
mhm,
right? It's
mhm,
circular. It takes on a life of its own. So in some ways, it's reflective of a a a Christian mindset in
yeah,
a particular era,
mhm,
but then it also produces a Christian mindset.
absolutely,
It kind of,
100%.
you know, and so what was going on in the world? What was going on? Because I think this really, actually, I think we might have stumbled onto something today. um,
Which is not
as
unusual for us.
as we often do. And we just follow the Lord, everybody. But no, seriously, we don't script this out. And
Yeah,
really, the
right.
idea, the focus in our pre-show meeting today was really, honestly, more leaned toward this idea of of how it is that we need to get to a place where we don't just have like passive discipleship in our home or passive discipleship in our churches. In other words, just don't just have where people show up and hopefully they'll hear the word and it'll make sense to them, and this passive discipleship in the home. You don't really tell your kids why we did that and whatever. They just sort of see it, and that was our conversation. But Chris, this is huge
Yeah,
because I think that there was an era where there was sort of a sentiment among people about the best way to reach people, sort of this, it was almost, we could say, passive evangelism. Don't,
absolutely.
don't, people don't
100%.
want to hear you shove it down their throats, blah, 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 blah. But we do, but I think so what was that? Where were we as a church at that particular time? Where was culture at that particular time that was something that people were like, "Hey, that's a really good idea." Cuz looking at it in 2024, I'm like, "This is dumb."
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I'm saying? I'm looking
yeah,
at it in 2024 thinking to myself, that's just dumb that even became popular."
right. Absolutely. Well, I don't fully know, kind of when that became, just kind of I hate to use the word or the phrase conventional wisdom, but it has. It's become so
Yeah.
deeply entrenched. It's just kinda become conventional wisdom. That's what we do. I think there's a there my guess would be this, that there was an awareness of our need to reach our world with the gospel, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
there was this push of like, "Man, we've gotta get outside the walls of the church. We've gotta get in our word. We gotta tell them about we believe in the power of the gospel." And, kind of there were the 2 polar ends of the spectrum where you've gotta go out and you gotta just hammer it, bless God. You just gotta shove it down their throats and tell them this is the way it is and whatever. And as we often do, you swing on the pendulum and you go the other end
Mhm.
where this scratches the itch
Mhm.
of we've often said that the spirit of God is a missional spirit. And so inside of every spirit-filled believer is an
Mhm.
awareness of our
Mhm.
responsibility to be witnesses unto him. You shall receive power after the Holy Ghost has come upon you, and you will be witnesses unto me. I think
Hmm.
there's an awareness inside of every believer that it's not enough just to come and be a good member on a church pew, but we have a responsibility to share what God's done in our lives as a testimony of what God could do in somebody else's life. And you look at the one end like, man, I don't wanna be that guy that goes out there and
Yeah.
preaches on the park bench and tells
Yeah.
everybody they're going to hell and doing all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so swing on the other end of the pendulum, it scratches the itch, but like I'm living it so people can see. And if they want it, then they can
Ex
see it in my life and whatever.
mm,
And so I think it eases the tension of
Hmm.
our responsibility to be missional, spirit-filled believers, but it doesn't really, right?
Hmm.
It's just a facade because the reality is, I remember kind of when this became really clear to me when I was working. I was young, new in ministry, whatever, and I was working in the secular world, and I had people around me that were very good people,
Hmm.
moral people.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
lived good moral lives. They had good families. They had good marriages. They had, like they were good moral people. They weren't believers.
Hmm. Hmm.
So so just because you live a good moral life and you don't do certain things or you do certain things, that does not necessarily demonstrate your faith, and people don't know what is the motive behind why you're living the life the way you live.
Hmm. Yeah. How did? Why don't they just say, well, they're really nice.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't ever use words, and that's what I'm saying. Where I guess my emphasis when I say it just doesn't. It just say it seems dumb to me that it was. You know what I mean?
How do you
But
really feel?
no, for real. That because that's the thing about it is it's like this mindset though that says you won't ever have to tell them. Well, why are you afraid to tell them?
Yeah, right.
That's
What
my
are you
my deal.
ashamed of something or
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so my question was like, does it come from like the seeker sensitive era? Is that,
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
you know what I
sure a big
mean?
part has to be a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, okay, sometimes I think the best way to think about these kinds of things is to argue it, you know, uh, ad absurdum.
Mhm.
You argue it to the point of absurdity. Okay, so let's say for example, you live and by the way, we see over and over and over Jesus tells because Jesus doesn't want an issue. Jesus doesn't want to get to for there to be so much attention upon his life and ministry early on
Mhm.
that it's nothing but clamor and dispute.
Yeah.
And so he actually tells people, see that you tell no one, just, whatever. And yet they go and tell.
Sure.
And look what Jesus did, And so you cannot help but to testify. And so, but okay, so let's say for example, you've got, somebody who becomes a missionary to a place that they've never heard Jesus and they don't ever use they don't ever use the name. They
Yeah.
just do good things and hope that eventually people will say, why do you always do such good things? Well, sure, we believe that if you live it in such a way that we're called to live like Jesus every
Sure.
single day. We're
Sure.
called to live like Jesus everywhere we are.
Sure.
You, you don't have okay, there's people that you don't have time to engage them. There's people that you don't have time to have those spiritual conversations. And so hopefully they'll say, why did you do that? Why are you so kind to me? Why did you forgive them? Why, and so, and so, so we understand that there is like living questionable lives. We talk about that.
100%.
So,
Absolutely.
so we totally believe that. But if you say, okay, preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, you use words, it sounds like this polarized statement that almost says, words or should be your last resort.
Yeah.
And okay, so you go to some country that they never even heard of Jesus before. Are you going to have massive effectiveness? When Paul went to Corinth, he
Yeah.
said, I purpose to know nothing among them save Jesus Christ and him crucified. He
Yeah.
said, when I declared Christ to you, he said, I didn't do it with enticing words that man's wisdom teaches, but in the power and demonstration of the Spirit. In other words, he came declaring Christ.
Yeah.
And so I think that I guess when I look at the New Testament church and I look at the movement that Jesus created, I don't find any level of polarity
Right.
between living your everyday life in such a questionable way that people say, what is your motivation? Who are you following? Why are you doing this? And then also declaring it to anybody who will listen.
Absolutely, and I think one of so, man, it's so beautifully stated, and I love what you said because absolutely, we've promoted the responsibility we have of living questionable lives, and Francis of Assisi, his statement was actually promoting what we're talking about,
Mhm.
which is which is one of the worst things you can do is preach something you're not living,
That's yeah.
right?
If he did make the statement at all,
Correct.
he was saying,
Correct. That wasn't his statement from what I've read is not even remotely close
yeah,
to the condensed down,
yeah,
quick snippet that we've got in our modern context. But the essence of where that quote was supposedly taken from was like, yeah, don't be a hypocrite. Live what you
right.
proclaim and then declare. Like let your preaching be backed up by how you're living, right?
So do you think he's saying, Chris, do you think another phrase would be that St. Francis of Assisi was saying, don't be that guy who says, don't do as I do, do as I say?
Oh man, for sure.
Like,
100%.
don't do as I do as I say. So a dad sitting there, puffing away on a Marlboro, and he looks at his kids and says, "Hey kids, look,
Yeah.
don't you ever start smoking."
Right.
And so say so if he was making a statement, it seems like what he's saying is, don't be that kind of person that your words don't match your actions.
Man, 100%. 100%. And I think the biggest issue is this, Ken. I think where that mindset and that attitude comes from is is a lack of incarnational living,
Yeah, very right.
right? So in other words, when none of us there's kind of this mindset and this attitude like nobody likes somebody knocking on their door. Right, like,
Right.
we all have Ring or we all have something that we can see and somebody rings the doorbell, we don't know who it is, and you, like, flip the lights off, dive on the floor, don't let anybody see you, like, nobody likes to be inconvenienced that way, and I think a lot of Christians view sharing their faith with people in that same in that same framework or whatever, like, nobody wants to be inconvenienced like that, nobody wants to be talked like that, but it's because of a lack of incarnational living.
That's so
Because
true.
when you're living incarnationally, you're gonna have relationship with people, and conversations about your faith are gonna come up naturally.
Boy,
They
that's
they
so
sh
true.
they should come up naturally. If I'm around people, yeah, we're gonna have conversations. We're gonna talk about, things that we enjoy. We're gonna talk about March Madness. We're gonna talk about, the Cubs, or we're gonna talk about whatever hunting, fishing, whatever your thing is. Like, you're gonna talk about those kinds of things. But if you're truly a disciple of Jesus, you're going to be able to have conversations with people that you have relationships in a way that it's not weird. It's not, like it doesn't feel like that you're taking out the shoehorn and just cramming it down their throats or whatever. It's just a natural part of the conversation. And so I love what you said. It's like the false dichotomy that we've produced. Is it discipleship or is it evangelism?
There it is. Right.
Right. Like, it's a false argument about that. The passive what people would describe as a passive discipleship approach is really just living a transformed life in my world. Should people do that? Absolutely.
But it's not passive.
But it's not passive. But I'm saying that's how they view
Yeah.
it.
I know,
So
right.
we've
No,
created this
exactly.
false narrative. It's that is actually an active faith that
Right.
is lived out in your world, and as you live that out in your world, you're looking for opportunities to share with people what people would consider
Mhm.
an active discipleship approach.
Mm.
You're looking for opportunities to share with people the things God's doing in your life, why you're not freaked out about COVID, why you're not freaked out about the things why you're not, freaked out about the eclipse and, all the things that stuff means or whatever. Like, you have this peace that's different from everybody in the world, and we've created so my point was we've created a false narrative, discipleship or evangelism. We've created this false narrative of just what was the term? What was the term? Lifestyle evangelism. You know,
Uh-huh.
lifestyle evangelism, which was live your life. Don't ever tell them about it. Just live your life in front of them versus sharing your faith and sharing the gospel. We've created this false paradigm, this false narrative that those things are competing against each other. And the reality is, it's descriptors that were never intended to be, right? And as believers, we have a responsibility to live that out, live it out, declare it, speak it. Jesus said, go into all nations, teaching them, right? We have a responsibility. How do you teach if you don't declare it? That's
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Isn't it interesting though? Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing when you begin to when you really stop and think about these things and you come to a place like we were just talking about ad absurdum.
Mhm.
You reach a point where it's, does it work all the way to the, does it break down at the point of absurdity? Um, like for example, you know, following Jesus, and Jesus is saying, if any man lose his life, he will find it. Well, you
Mhm.
take that statement to the point of absurdity and say, well, do you think Jesus was really talking about losing your life as in like martyrdom? It's like, yeah.
Right.
I mean, isn't
Right.
it weird? Like 11 of the 12 disciples, post Pentecost disciples died a martyr's death.
Right.
So, but all right. So when you start talking about, as you were talking, one thing became very apparent to me,
Yeah.
and that is that statement, those concepts, those sentiments only really make sense if you have an attractional framework in your
Okay.
mind.
Okay. In what
Uh,
way?
if it, so you think about the attractional church, you think
Okay.
about trying to, so it all you sort of congeals at this point of saying, what are we trying to do? We're trying to grow the church. We're trying to get more members. We're
Mm.
trying to,
Yes.
and so if you think of it from an attractional perspective, the idea would be, look, let's allow just sort of passive evangelism to be the way we do things. You may get them to come to church with you. They may like it. You have people out there that say two things you don't talk about: religion and politics.
Yeah.
And so the mindset is, okay, well, if people say, I don't want to talk about that, then you see how over time it
Yeah.
will forge this new perspective
Yeah.
that says, the best way that we can actually do this is in this sort of non-aggressive. So passive, to me, passive is actually the opposite of active. It's
Mhm.
passive and active,
Yeah.
but it can also be the difference between passive and aggressive.
Sure.
And so from the perspective of saying, like what you just said, knocking on people's doors, showing up Saturday morning where they're fixing pancakes and bacon, and not knowing why somebody doesn't want to talk to you about your church when you don't have any relationship with them, you don't, etc. So this is, to me, like you said, swinging on the pendulum. The only way you could swing on the pendulum is if there's these things are sort of like diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
So if you believe that passive and aggressive evangelism are diametrically opposed in their effectiveness, then the mindset is, well, you need to more passively sort of,
Mhm.
very covertly bring Jesus into those relationships. But when you really look at the biblical model, okay, so what we do is, all right, so let's take that and let's measure it against the biblical model.
Yeah.
You just quoted a scripture. So so if you're watching what Chris just did when he made the statement that Jesus said, go into all the world, make disciples and teach them to observe all that I've commanded. You cannot teach people to observe all that Jesus has commanded by just simply living out Jesus in front of them, right? There has to
Correct.
be an active dialogue. It
Yeah.
has to be an active dialogue. now,
Jesus
now,
did it.
right. What makes a person be willing to have an active dialogue with you? What makes a person believe that you're even worthy of having the dialogue with in the first place is exactly what you said. Is it who you really are? Is it a true pistuo faith that you got? Are you all in? But here's what's so funny. If you look at the words and say, is there a way to do passive discipleship?
Yeah.
So you think passive, so Jesus said, go make disciples. Okay. Can we make disciples passively? Go, okay. You think about, all right. So let's think about the word. Okay. Euangelion.
Mhm.
Okay. Which
Evangelize.
evangelize. The word euangelion is a word that literally means to proclaim the gospel, to proclaim. It means to proclaim the good news. Okay.
Right.
So
Jesus came preaching.
so here's the question. So that's the word for evangelize, by the way. Evangelism comes from the word. I mean, you go look at the word euangelion, it's Euaggelion. You take the U and make it a V in the
Yeah.
English language,
Yeah.
evangelion.
Yeah.
That's what the word evangelion.
Right.
It is the proclamation of the gospel. Can you passively proclaim the gospel?
Right. Right.
You can't.
Absolutely. There's no way.
Right.
There's no way. And this is why, man, as you're talking there, the I'm gonna say this, the attractional model, the attractional church growth, seeker-friendly stuff has been one of the most detrimental things
Mm-hmm.
to the modern church,
100%.
more than any outward spiritual attack and whatever, because you can see how it's shaped and framed, because what we're talking about today is the individual expression of what's been communicated corporately,
That's exactly right.
right?
That's exactly
So,
right.
we're not gonna talk about the blood because, people are gonna be weird about blood. We're not gonna talk about, death or resurrection, or we're not gonna do all that kind of stuff because we don't want unbelievers or people not understanding the insider language and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, so if I'm sitting in a pew and I'm hearing that and I'm listening to that, how do I live that out individually? It
Hmm.
produces passivity. It produces a world,
Mm.
a
Mm-hmm.
a mindset, a culture of believers like, well, if my church is doing this, when I live this out, I don't want to do that out there in the world. I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel like they're missing out on something, whatever. So I'm not going to say anything to them. And that's been one of the greatest detrimental things that's ever happened to the church because of exactly what you're saying. And again, I think it all goes back to, it's because we've misapplied what it means to reach our world. We've missed the component of relationship. We've allowed ourselves to, instead of becoming separated, we've allowed ourselves to become isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Very good, bud.
isolation has removed us from relationships where we're able to express in a natural, I hate to use the word organic, but in a natural, organic way. It just comes up naturally, my faith and the expression of my faith, So looking at it from that way, a lot of people view it as two options. You can either be what we're talking about, kind of
Mm-hmm.
that I'm gonna live my life. I'm gonna be a good person, and if somebody's interested, they can come and they can ask me about it. Or, I can be the guy that wears the T-shirt, the baseball cap that says, you're going to hell, or you need Jesus, or whatever, and get the bullhorn and preach it. And what we're saying is, no, exactly what you're saying, Ken. It's not active versus passive.
Yep.
It's come back to the center of truth, which is live the life. You better be living a life. You better be living. This is why we say, in order to be a true missional believer, you've got to be a disciple first,
Mm-hmm.
which is you living the life. And then if you're living the life, the most important things to Jesus will become the most important things to you. And you'll want to do the other piece, which is share with people why you are. If it had not been for Jesus, bro, I don't want people to think that I'm a good person just because I'm a good person. I want
Mm,
people to know that the reason that I live the life I live, the reason that I have the peace and the joy, and the reason that I have the things that I have in my life is because Jesus changed me. Jesus did the work. I want people to know that.
that's so good.
And we've got to awaken that up in people. Be a disciple and make disciples.
Mm. Whew, man, that's that's so good because if you this is what's so good about this is what you're doing is you're really tearing down that middle wall. That
Yeah.
there is no they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Um
Right.
that that it could be just as easy for a person to not be like Jesus but talk about him,
Mhm.
and it could be just as easy for that person to be for that to be a cop out,
Yeah.
you know,
Sure.
that I told him. I told him where I went to church. I shared my faith. I told him how I got saved.
Yeah.
I mean, blood's off my hands now,
Right.
you know? And so there could be this mindset
That's
that
a
when
great point, man.
so you put it on two ends of the spectrum, and you could say, well, on one end of the spectrum, you've got people that are very passive in their evangelism because they're like, well, I don't want to turn people off. And I just don't, I don't know. And I feel kind of awkward. And and the fear of rejection, and and golly, that's my next door neighbor, and if they think every time I'm going to talk to them, I'm going to tell them, you ought to be serving Jesus, that they're going to, look out the garage door to see if I'm out somewhere before they even come out to rake their leaves. I don't, man, I don't want to be that guy, and blah blah blah, and so on and so forth, and so and so this is why it's so detrimental to put these things into like mutually exclusive categories, where on one end of the spectrum you've got somebody that's like, well, you know what, I'm just going to keep loving them, I'm just going to keep showing them Jesus, and hopefully one day they'll realize that, whatever, I don't know, hopefully one day, I mean,
Yeah.
but then, which is really no different than what we say about a lot of attractional church stuff, where people say, well, we're just going to keep coming to church and serving God, and we're just going to keep praying and having good church, and hopefully one day it's gonna all happen, right?
Yeah.
But then you know what? But then if you are able to categorize things, then you could say, yeah, but then the aggressive evangelist person, maybe somebody who's they shared their faith, but that's it. End of discussion. Now they know it's between them and Jesus. You know,
Right.
I have no other responsibility to them.
Yeah.
I told them. And what you're saying is that actually being like Jesus is a is it's all of this is in one mixing bowl.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even the gifted evangelist that sometimes might seem like, maybe they're a little more radical in certain areas. Like, we need that in the body of Christ. Like,
right.
we totally get that. We need people that have, there's a lot of talk right now about the fivefold ministry or the fivefold, I I wanna be careful. I
Yeah.
don't believe they're offices, I believe they're giftings,
Right.
and and we need shepherds who have a
Mhm.
loving heart that are willing just to get into people's world and just love on them and whatever. You have people that have more of an apostolic gifting that are not wired that way, and the beautiful thing is that Jesus fitly framed the body together with all of
Mm,
that. So you have different giftings and different types, but all of us
mm.
all of us are called to be disciples that make disciples.
That's it.
All of us are called to live on mission in whatever that expression
Yeah.
is. So
Regardless of our gifting.
regardless of your gifting, and so it's easy to be like, well, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to do that. And you may never be the person that goes out and, has 100 discipleship relationships going on or whatever, right? You may
Yeah.
never be that person, but we often get a lot of questions from, like, introverts, okay? So this is a good conversation about, like, introverts. A lot of people because we've put it in that category of the passive versus active, and it's, again, scratch the itch for passive people or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
for introverted people to be like, "Well, at
Yeah.
least I can do something, I can live a life." But here's what we say is, "No, God created you that way. God created you, with that personality." And the reality is introverted people can be actually sometimes even way better
Mm.
disciple makers than extroverts because they're willing to have deeper relationships with people.
And they're willing to stop, they're willing to stop and let somebody else talk a while. They're able to,
Well, there's that, right?
right, for real. Like extroverts are always like
100%,
blah 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 whatever, and
100%.
introverts, they're willing to hear their friend, their
Yeah,
neighbor. That's
yeah,
awesome, dude.
yeah.
By the way, I like what Sherry said. Sherry Goodermont makes the statement, said the Cain mindset, right? And my brother's keeper. And when,
Mhm.
when she said that, I like that because it has to do with that comment, it has to do with love your neighbor as yourself. See, this is why I'm saying, Chris, when you said about this is what really hammered me when you made that statement about being the disciple.
Yeah.
The thing that I thought was so powerful about that is the fact that Jesus said the two great commandments, love the Lord with all your heart, love your neighbors yourself. That fixes everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's it
Yeah.
doesn't,
Yeah.
that in itself is so, like for example, as people that, you and I coach culture creation, having a biblical book of Acts kingdom culture creation, dude, isn't it amazing where like the question we would ask is, say, well, what is loving the Lord with all your heart and loving your neighbors yourself telling you to do?
Mhm. Mhm.
Don't you think that's huge?
Oh, man, bro, 100%. I mean, Jesus said everything hangs on that.
Yeah.
Like, literally, everything hangs on that piece of it, and if you love somebody, if you love your neighbors yourself, you have the responsibility to share with them, what God is doing. You have the
Right.
responsibility to share to even ask tough questions. When you
Right.
love people, you're
There,
right?
bro. Doggone it. See, there's where it's at. Like, that's what I meant when I was talking about like the event, the attractional model, the church growth model is, that there's a way that somehow you can influence them, and then hopefully they'll come to church and they'll hear something and they'll be impressed or whatever, and then through that mechanism give it a second look or whatever.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing about it is loving my neighbor as myself allows me to basically say, I will both be, if I see my neighbor out, in the yard trying to pull down a tree, and he's got his lawnmower hooked up to the tree, or like a small tree, and he's got a rope and he's trying to pull his tree over,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
instead of going, what a doofus, what is he doing, um
Right.
to go get, if you've got an axe, or if you've got, whatever it might be, or you may have a bigger tractor, whatever.
Sure.
To loving your neighbors yourself says, oh man, I got to go help Bob out.
Right.
But then loving your neighbor also means that when you go in prayer time,
Mhm.
that Bob's soul condition is also going to trouble you as
Yeah.
as much as his difficulty getting the tree out of his yard. There's going to be a burden in your heart for him, getting him out of his eternal pathway of eternal destruction.
Yeah. What would happen if we started looking at it, love my neighbors as I love myself? Yeah, I think the closest connection is familial relationship,
Mhm.
right? And what if
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that frustrates me about our world is this this putting into different categories that well, you
Yeah.
can't understand me because you're not in my category and
Right.
whatever. What if we what if we started looking at people through the lens of family? And what I know is my brother, if there were things that you saw in my life from a place of love, you would ask me some hard questions.
Right.
If I was doing things that were destructive or whatever, like, you would ask me those difficult questions that would put me in tension, and you would I know you would let me make my decisions,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't be silent in it,
No.
and and
Just say,
that's
or
where
I wouldn't say, well, I'm just going to keep living out the
yeah.
biblical objective in front of him and hopefully
One
he'll,
of these days, right? Yeah, so I did a quick series here about, Jesus being moved with compassion, and I talked about how that, we often a lot of people view God as kind of bipolar. There's the Old Testament God who was angry, mean, full of justice and judgment, and the New Testament God who was like the hippie Jesus,
yeah,
love and there's no whatever.
right.
And the reality is, from Genesis to Revelation, is filled with the idea and the concept of compassion.
Hmm.
And the Hebrew word for compassion literally means from the womb. And
Uh-huh.
it's the love of a mother that comes from the core being of who that person is. And again, all throughout the Old Testament, there's compassion. Jesus comes on the scene. He's in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was made flesh, dwelt among us, right? Jesus was the express image of the invisible God. And at least 5 occasions, it says that Jesus was moved with compassion. I think the missing piece, Ken,
Yeah.
is I think we've extracted the compassion for people out of it. We we
Well,
we've started viewing people as groups and categories, and if they don't believe like me, and if they don't whatever, and so we put them in different categories. And what moved Jesus into action was his compassion for people, his
mm,
love for people. If you have compassion, okay, Jesus says, "These people have followed me for 3 days. I don't want them to go home weary. I don't want them to go home without anything." What is that? Jesus was moved into action to do something, to feed them because he loved them, because he had compassion on them, right?
mhm,
That's that's what we're called to do. We have that spirit living inside of us.
mhm.
If we're not moved to act in people's lives, we're missing the compassion piece. I think that's a huge part of it.
Mm-mm-mm. Man, which is funny because it's so funny because you hear like there was an era, where the mindset was, just do good for people without a hook,
Mhm.
was
Yeah,
sort of the,
again, same
you know,
thing, right?
yeah. So it's all kind of on the same, it's kind of all on the same axis, you
Mhm.
know. Is it, do you go and do something so that it will obligate them to have a conversation with you?
Yeah.
Or, well, if you're doing what you're saying, loving your neighbors yourself, I'm not going to go over when, Bob's struggling to pull out his, that small tree with his lawnmower. I'm not going over saying, hey, this might be my opportunity to finally get a chance to talk to him about Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, so the mindset is, man, they will sniff you out so fast if, if you're like, I heard somebody one time say they have these water bottles, that you can take the wrapper off and put like a church wrapper on,
Mhm.
and this guy was like, you know, oh, see that they're going to just think you're just giving them water because they want you to know, you want them to know, your church, or you're trying to get them to come to church or obligate them to come to church or whatever. And so it's again, it's that polarizing type, it's that mutually exclusive,
Yep.
it's that, okay, so you're making an assumption that, if hey, I'm going to give you a free water now, come to church Sunday. it still is in a category that is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
That it's the only way that you could think of those. Bro, I promise you right now, we could get water and put Lifeway labels on them and just say, well, why is that not passive evangelism?
Yeah.
Why is that not
Yeah.
preaching the
Right.
gospel but not using words?
Right.
Like it gets to the point where it's like,
Yeah.
look, hook, you got the water bottle with your church name, and they're just going to realize they're not going to see you as authentic.
Right.
That's not going to speak to authenticity because, okay, you know what? that so I'm a reason why I keep saying water bottle. Okay. That, my bro, is still being processed through the filter of attractional model church growth.
100%.
It's still, well, all you're
That's what
trying to
it's all
do is
about.
you're still trying to get them to come to church. Okay. But Jesus says, if you give someone, no, I said the Bible says, I don't think it was Jesus. If you give someone, was it Jesus or was it in the epistles? In other words, anyway, if you don't give a person a cup of water
Mm-hmm.
in the name of a prophet without receiving a prophet's reward.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is that Jesus said, in as much as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And so all that you do in word and deed, do it all in the name of Jesus.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if you're doing it in the name of church growth, sure, it's going to look like
That's it. That's
you're
it.
going to,
There
sure,
it
it's
is.
going to look like you're doing, well, it's not, it's, so you're like, well, but you told me to do passive evangelism. How that's passive. Nobody's saying, hey, you need to give your life to Jesus Christ. We're giving them a stinking bottle of water at a
Yeah.
parade. And it's
Right.
got I know, but that label is a hook with a worm on it.
Yeah.
And so here's the deal. Only in a church growth,
So good.
attractional model perspective can you look at that and say, that is, you say, so you're telling me, putting our church label on a bottle of water that is aggressive evangelism because it still has a hook. And they're like, well, it's passive aggressive evangelism.
Ooh.
So we're talking about passive and aggressive, right? We're talking about passive and active. It's like, for crying out loud, what the
Passive
blue
aggressive.
blazes are we supposed to do? Like, well, that's passive aggressive because it's still got a hook on it with a worm. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me, people. And here's the deal. At the end of the day, it's like, look, we're just going to love our neighbors ourselves. We're just going to, here's the deal. You're still talking from the dysfunction of the church growth paradigm. We're going to talk Jesus movement. And in the Jesus movement, here's the deal. End of the day, we're going to do all of it.
Yeah. Do you believe here? I think here's the core of it, Ken. Okay. Put a little tension on some folks. Do you believe that the Jesus way is the better way?
Ooh.
If you believe that the Jesus way is the better way, and it's exactly what you said, the only way that you start getting caught in this quandary is if you view it through church lens, if you view it through wins and losses of church attendance, whatever. If you genuinely believe that Jesus is the better way, okay, like Berkey water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like my in-laws were like, man, you got to try this water. This is the best water you've ever had in your life. It's got these filters and it does this. You can put ditch water in it and it'll filter it out, blah, blah, blah. And guess what? I tasted Berkey water.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I'm never going back to anything else. Berkey water is the best. I got my own Berkey.
Yeah.
Right. Like we do that about so many other things. But one way that hell has been successful is putting that into place where like we do it in almost every other capacity of life, but we feel awkward or weird about doing about the most important thing in our entire world, which is God transforming our lives. And if we believe that Jesus is the better way, then it's not about church growth.
Mm,
It's not about me personally winning or losing. It's about me sharing with people what God is capable of doing, what he's done in my life, what he can do in their life, giving them an opportunity. I want everybody to experience Berkey water.
mm.
I want everybody to experience the better way of Jesus because I believe it with every ounce of my being.
Man.
If you don't believe it with every ounce of your being, you're gonna get hung up in these weird little nuancy, like you said, the passive aggressive. I love that. The passive
Yeah.
aggressive, like you get caught in this deal, like, I don't know which way to turn. When
Yeah.
you just purify it all down, that just simply says, I think Jesus is the better way. I want everybody to know about that. And I may not always do it right. And I may, but my what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna live the life. I'm gonna try to live incarnationally with people because that's what Jesus did, and I'm gonna share with them why my life hopefully looks different than the way everybody else is living. And it's not me. It's not because I have a stronger will. It's not because I have a better moral compass. It's not the only reason that I am who I am is because of the transformational power of Jesus. That's it.
Mhm. End of the day. End of the day, end of discussion. It's man, we didn't even get to today. We didn't even get to, what happens when the church has passive versus active disciple making or in our home. Like we
Mhm.
didn't, I
Yeah,
mean, we
we
didn't
didn't
even
talk
get
about that.
that's what we actually talked about in our pre-show, and we didn't even talk about it. And I think, but I think that, I mean, and I do think that that's a different conversation for a different time because it is a different, it's a whole different kind of conversation,
Right.
but,
Right.
but sort of
Absolutely.
with the same circulatory system. Um, but I think, here's at the, when it's all shakes down, the, the people that have the ability to understand that it's all it's all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
here's the
100%.
deal. It's like this. What's more important? Vitamins or minerals?
Right.
If you look at it if
Absolutely.
you look at it from that perspective and you say, "Well, here's the deal." If you say, "Do you take a daily vitamin?" Say, "Well, I do, but it also has minerals." So technically, it's not just a vitamin. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like when you start parsing it down to the silliness of that, I think
Right.
that's the thing where we say, you know, I think we need vitamins and minerals. And I think that I think if you need a tablet that's got both of them with 100% of RDA, vitamins and minerals. And I think disciples are a single, I don't think you know, a vitamin company doesn't say, here's your, one a day of your vitamins, and here's your one a day of your minerals. And you have to have, and you need to know which one no, they put it all in one tablet.
Mhm.
You take a one a day, you put it in your mouth, you take your vitamins, your minerals, and whatever other kind of substances they think you need, and it's all part of the same thing. I think what we're saying today is this: there is a time when you just need to be the hands and feet of Jesus. There is
Yeah.
a time when you need to be
Sure.
an all-in disciple who's just living it
Sure.
out, loving people because you love your neighbors yourself and because you're expressing your love for God because he loves them.
Yeah.
But then at this by the same token, you also understand that I don't really love my neighbors myself if I'm afraid that if I have a conversation with them that it's going to somehow turn them off, so I'm just going to keep living it and copping out. Or if I don't really love my disciple, so this is the vitamin, but I'm going to leave the mineral off.
Mhm.
Or you could be the mineral, but I'm going to leave the vitamin off.
Yeah.
And you're like you go hardcore aggressive evangelism, but there's no, because like, well, I did my obligation. So either way, you don't love your neighbor. So guess what? Being disciples means we live it out. We talk about our experiences. We share how he's transformed us. when the right times come up, we say, look, this is how I deal with it. This is what we teach, Chris.
Yeah.
This is what we teach pastors. Like, this is how we say, this is the way you create a culture, is
Yeah.
to have people that understand, you know what, when a person gets to a point where they share, man, I got this thing going on in my life. And you're like, I know that's tough. I've been there. The only
Yeah.
way I got through it was, I just, I went through a time of just really, I fasted and I prayed and, whatever. You share your story. It's just natural the whole way around. And, it's one vitamin.
It's one
It's
vitamin.
discipleship. It's being a disciple and making disciples. It's one vitamin.
It's absolutely. And that's boiled down to the simplest form, right? We've overcomplicated
Yep.
so much. We've overcomplicated it, and we've gotten people hung up. It's like in sports. Of course, we love March Madness. You can tell when a guy gets in his head and he starts thinking too much. And we've had coaches that have told us, just play.
Right.
Just you've got it in you. Just go play the game. Be natural. Be athletic. Be who you are. You
Stop
know how
thinking
to
so much.
stop thinking so much, right? When you start thinking too much, and I think we've done that in reaching our world and faith. It really is simple. And it's exactly what you said, be a disciple that makes disciples. So great conversation, Ken.
Yep.
Really, like you said, we just barely even kind of scratched the surface on it. We went a totally different direction than what we kind of planned on. So
Kind
maybe
of
we'll
crazy.
revisit this at some point. So
Yep.
appreciate everybody jumping on, being a part of the conversation today. And man, it's interesting across all platforms, the growth that we've had
Yeah.
on these lives on the different platforms, which is amazing. We appreciate everybody jumping on. Appreciate everybody being a part. And again, we just want to say thank you for your expressions of love to us. We love the church family. We're thankful for all of the amazing people, Ken, that God has connected us with through this journey. Has been an amazing thing. I love the body of Christ. I'm thankful for my church family.
Very thankful. Amen.
Absolutely. Love you guys. Appreciate you. Appreciate you being on. We look forward to coming back to you. Actually, no, we
I
won't
started
be.
to say we may have to do it Monday.
We won't be next Tuesday. We'll let you know.
Yep.
Funeral for our mother is next Tuesday, so we will not be here on Tuesday, but we'll keep you posted and let you know about next week. So be on the lookout for that. So love you, appreciate you. Look forward to coming back to you next time. Until then, go live mobilized. God bless everybody.